Chase nearly ruined his underwear when he saw the terrifying, ghastly pale visage of the ghost moving towards him in the abandoned insane asylum. Until he realized it was actually just the pasty face of his co-star Keith, and also realized what an absolute fool of himself he'd just made on camera. Cut, he said in an exhausted voice he was way too used to using now. A few feet away, Chase and Keith's cameraman, Nick, turned off the recording. This had been yet another humiliating failure, a serious knock to all of their ambitions as YouTube ghost hunting personalities. And to think, they'd come all the way to Romania for this and not seen a single lousy ghost.
Maybe we should check out the vampire lead,
Keith asked, trying to salvage the situation.
A million people have done Dracula's castle, Keith,
Chase said.
And he probably didn't even live there. No, I mean that thing the locals told us about in the bar, the abandoned monastery in the Hoia Forest.
Well, he'd heard worse ideas. An hour later, they were driving their rented SUV down a dirt road to the storied forest of supernatural horrors. The local stories were enticing. People being attacked and spirited away by pale men who crawl out of the monastery when the sun goes down. Of course, Chase, Keith, and Nick didn't believe any of that hokum for a minute, but it'd at least make it an interesting background for a video. They wandered through the forest as dusk crept closer, painting the distant sky in shades of orange. Chase did his piece to camera, with Keith standing off to the side, hyping him up.
What is up, guys? I'm Chase, and you're tuning in to Chasing Mysteries, where we are on location in Hoia Forest, out in Romania. That's right, y'all, Dracula country. And we're investigating legends of a ruined monastery out in these woods that might just be a vampire nest. So smash that subscribe button and join us for the horrors.
The hours crept on as they trudged deeper and deeper into the forest, and soon enough, night fell. The only sources of illumination were their flashlights and night vision cameras, and then the noises began. All the creaks and rustles and wails of the forest at night. They couldn't help but feel a little unnerved by it all. But in a way, the more unnerved they all were, the better the content would be on the other end. Chase turned to the camera and said,
Oh, and by the way, if you sign up to the Chasing Mysteries Patreon, you can get so much fun bonus material that you won't find here on the main channel. From exclusive behind-the-scenes material, extra content, and even previews of our upcoming vids.
Incidentally, and by pure coincidence, these are also all the perks you can get by becoming a junior researcher and signing up to the DrBob Patreon. Haha, what a funny coincidence. Anyway, back to the darkness of the Hoia Forest. Even in their winter coats, the rural Romanian night was unforgiving in its cold. Of course, they wouldn't find anything supernatural out here, but the natural hazards of the forest were enough to give them pause. In fact, they were so wrapped up in being warm, they barely even heard the footsteps coming towards them in the dark. Until Chase heard a scream. He and Nick looked up to see that something had grabbed hold of Keith, a tall and thin figure, naked, with stark white skin. Keith screamed as it dragged him back behind the tree line. Chase turned to Nick, only to see that his cameraman had already taken off running in the other direction. The last thing Chase heard from him were the words, "I don't get paid enough for this," fading out into the night. But Chase wouldn't give up so easily. It seemed that he might be staring down the barrel of the thing he'd searched his entire life for, genuine, bona fide paranormal activity, and he wasn't about to let that slip through his fingers. Oh, and he wanted to save his friend too. That was definitely equally important to him. Chase gave his namesake and followed the path down which the pale figure had dragged his friend. They darted through the forest until he saw the imposing figure of the ruined monastery rise up above him. Yes, this must have been where it dragged Keith. He ran inside through a segment of ruined wall, lighting his way with the flashlight on his iPhone. There was this awful sound, a kind of wet slurping noise, and moments later, the thin beam of light found its origin point. That awful creature was hunched over what was left of his friend, a long, meaty proboscis sticking out of its mouth and into Keith's neck, sucking. Keith himself looked like a punctured waterbed or a deflating balloon, slowly shrinking and crumpling as the creature sucked him dry, a human Capri Sun pouch. Chase turned and tried to run, but there were more of those hideous, pale creatures there, with their no eyes and their big, bat-like ears and noses. They descended upon him, gathering him up in their claws and dragging him deeper and deeper into the bowels of the monastery. until the walls gave way to fleshy, sepulchral tunnels, alive with ribbon-like worms. The monsters held him in place as he struggled, forcing him down to his knees and wrenching open his jaws. Another monster appeared, holding in its hands a huge, wriggling worm the size of your average snake. As much as Chase tried to move or bite down, it was futile. His eyes rolled back into his head as the huge worm was forced inch by inch down his throat, the monsters all making these terrible clicking noises with their mouths. And then, Chase's skin began to pale. It's a terrible thing to see a fellow YouTuber cut down in his prime like that. So many subscribers lost. If only he'd reached out to me, DrBob, for a collaboration. I could have told him that any attempt to film SCP-2191, also known as the Dracula Factory, would end in absolute tragedy. Allow me to explain exactly how this unique and terrifying anomaly works, as both a matter in general Foundation education and a reminder that if you find yourself vacationing in Romania, it's wise to just stick to the more tourist-friendly attractions. At its most basic level, SCP-2191 appears to be the ruins of an Eastern Orthodox temple hidden deep in the infamous Hoia Forest in Romania, a place long thought to be an epicenter for bizarre and often paranormal activity. However, appearances can be deceptive. When you look a little further in, you see that lower levels of the building exhibit both Thracian and Dacian architecture, as well as objects from the multi-millennia-old Cucuteni-Trypillian in the tunnels beneath that. The unfortunate crew of the Chasing Mysteries YouTube channel didn't have the historical know-how to be aware of all this, but the more academic minds here at the Foundation have posited that these peculiar, multi-era architectural flourishes reflect a predatory intent. The building is designed to appear inviting to strangers lost in the forest and looking for a place of sanctuary in their time of strife, luring them inside to a terrible fate that we'll discuss shortly. As eras and architectural styles change, SCP-2191 is altered to keep up with the prevailing style accordingly, so as never to arouse suspicion among the masses. But if you think the building itself cuts a rather ominous silhouette, it truly doesn't hold a candle to the horrors inside. And on that note, I really don't recommend that you attempt to literally hold a candle to the horrors inside. The light makes them angry. The most common variety of creatures in the castle are referred to as SCP-2191-1, an entity that was once human, as our dear departed friend Chase found out in the most direct and disgusting manner imaginable. They've undergone a number of mutations that should, by all rights, have been fatal, including the disappearance of almost all of their major organs, save for their brain, heart, and lungs. Their skin is deathly pale and has the textural appearance of cracked porcelain, like a haunted Victorian doll, and their eyes have regressed behind thick lids. While these instances are capable of sensing light and appear to have an extremely adverse reaction to it, they are functionally blind and compensate with biological modifications to their other senses. Their noses have become large and upturned, like that of a vampire bat, to increase their sense of smell. Their ears have also become large and funnel-shaped to increase the quality and strength of their hearing. They've lost all ability to speak, and instead only make a loud clicking noise with their mouths, believed to aid in echolocation. And quite like the classic vampires of Romanian myth, these terrible entities age and decay extremely slowly, and have an incredibly slow metabolism to match. None of the instances we've cataloged seem to have exhibited any biological or superficial changes in the over a century that SCP-2191 has been on the Foundation's radar. The facilitator of this is not SCP-2191-1 itself, but seemingly instead a number of worm-like organisms that have a symbiotic relationship with SCP-2191. They fall under the banner of SCP-2191-2. There are 3 main species that we've currently been able to identify, and if I may editorialize here, they are all absolutely revolting. Of course, there is SCP-2191-2A, a huge lamprey-like creature with a large mouth filled with concentric circles of teeth designed to empower leech-like blood feeding. 2As exist within the torsos of the humanoid SCP-2191-1 instances, curling up in their abdomen inside the hollow space where the creature's intestines would have once lay when they were human. The 2As appear to drive the feeding instincts of SCP-2191, perhaps through some kind of neurochemical signaling system that we have yet to fully understand. SCP-2191-2B are long, thin worms that travel through a complex network of tunnels hidden inside the hollow walls of SCP-2191, similar in structure to an ant or termite nest. If you are still foolhardy enough to be eating lunch while watching this video, I suggest you put down the sandwich immediately before you hear what comes next. The 2Bs are designed to extract nutrients gathered by the 2As by entering the bodies of the humanoid entities, typically through the mouth or, well, the back entrance. They then slither back out to deliver those nutrients back to the nest itself. SCP-2191-2C are the third and, to my view, the most fascinating of all the -2 organisms. These long, thick worms are also connected to the internal structure of the SCP-2191 nest, and on the inside are comprised mainly of neural tissue. When the SCP-2191-1 instances are in an active state, which happens between periods of feeding, the 2Cs slither towards them and connect to their nervous system at the base of their spine, seemingly wiring them into some wider hive mind. During this moment of connection, SCP-2191-1 instances will get down to their knees and take up a pose similar to a person in prayer. All three varieties of worm have startling genetic commonalities to human beings. It suggests that some inherent degree of genetic compatibility has always entwined our fates and made us the perfect prey to the monsters that lurk in SCP-2191. Speaking of prey, after decades of observation, we've actually managed to get our understanding of the feeding patterns of the creatures in SCP-2191 down to an exact science. Between dusk and dawn, at least one of the SCP-2191-1 instances will become active and begin hunting through the forests for human prey. And I do mean human, because study has shown that these entities have no interest whatsoever in non-human animals. It's also worth noting that while multiple instances of SCP-2191 can be active at once, they do not pack hunt, instead distributing themselves around the wider vicinity of the Hoia Forest to maximize their potential of catching prey. And when they do catch that prey, things start to become extremely unpleasant. They will grab onto any unlucky human that they can get their hands on and inject a paralytic into their body through barbs protruding from their lower fingers. When their victim is unable to fight back, their jaws will grotesquely unhinge, and the SCP-2191-2A worm will emerge. It will latch onto the body of the victim and inject a digestive enzyme that will cause bone, muscle, and organ within the body to liquid, turning into a thick soup. The worm will then greedily swallow it up over the next 20 to 50 minutes, depending on the size of the prey, leaving only an empty sack of skin behind. Once the feeding process is complete, SCP-2191-1 will return to the nest to share the wealth. I bet you're glad I told you to stop eating, aren't you? A fascinating fact about SCP-2191 is that the locals in the rural area around Hoia Forest have been aware of the anomaly for quite some time. But it only became known to the Foundation in 1916, during the First World War, after 244 members of the Austro-Hungarian First Army completely disappeared during the Battle of Transylvania. Frustratingly, because this was still a high kinetic zone in the war, the Foundation couldn't actually get in there to research and begin implementing containment procedures until 1919. Oftentimes, the Foundation entering the area and beginning to contain the anomaly is where the most eventful portions of that anomaly's existence ended. That is absolutely not the case with SCP-2191. While a false sense of security was perhaps imbued by the anomaly appearing to go dormant after 1924, several horrific incidents occurred between 1932 and 1977 that changed our perspective entirely. And that was what led to the discovery of SCP-2191-3. On September 26, 1932, in Greece, the Chalkidiki Peninsula was laid low by the Erissos earthquake, resulting in 491 reported casualties. 126 of these casualties went completely unaccounted for, with no trace of the victims having ever been found, something that we would later realize was deeply connected to SCP-2191. On December 26, 1939, the Erzincan earthquake would kill over 33,000 people in Turkey. Around that time, some locals would report a, quote, great serpent rising from the ground. The Foundation began investigating the area and suppressed these reports not long after. On November 10, 1940, an earthquake struck Vrancea in Romania, thankfully not causing a great deal of casualties compared to the ones I just mentioned. However, there were scattered reports of vampire attacks in the weeks that followed the earthquake, which the Foundation suppressed as the superstitious ramblings of locals. On March 18, 1953, another earthquake, the Yenica-Gurnen, would wreak havoc across Turkey, killing over 1,000 people. Some of the survivors said they saw the arm of an octopus rising up from the ground during the incident, and that in the days after the incident, the Pale Men were attacking survivors in the ruins. These reports continued for up to a month after the quake stopped. On July 26, 1963, the Skopje earthquake hit Macedonia, killing over 1,000 and leaving over 200,000 without shelter. It probably won't surprise you to hear that there were yet again reports of strange, pale figures descending on people at night. When the dust settled, around 500 people had gone missing in the disaster's direct aftermath. And of course, on March 4, 1977, Brencia was hit with another earthquake, though one much more devastating this time. Over 1,500 people were killed, 800 of which went missing entirely, and yet again, reports of pale men wandering the night were common. This time, though, Foundation operatives were already stationed in the area and were able to make the first definitive connection to SCP-2191. Tunneling teams were sent into the epicenter of the earthquake. Upon traveling deep enough, they discovered the source of every anomalous atrocity connected to this singularly dangerous entity, SCP-2191-3. 3 is a giant organic creature with tendrils spanning at least 660,000 square kilometers, excreting a highly corrosive substance that has allowed it to melt a complex tunnel network beneath the Balkan states. This being is ancient and incredibly intelligent and uses the SCP-2191-2C worms to control all the other instances, and the SCP-2191-2B worms to extract nutrients from their feedings. This entire system is all essentially designed to feed this one immense and terrible monster lurking deep under the earth. And a concerning fact that the Foundation learned around this same time was that everything they were just learning had been common knowledge to the locals for centuries. They had effectively sacrificed people to SCP-2191 in order to stop it from causing earthquakes while looking for other sources of food. Wanting to understand this morbid cultural tradition, Foundation researcher Dr. Judith Lowe interviewed Draga Negrescu, a 96-year-old village elder descended from the Solomonari, a proto-Sarkic sect known for practicing blood rituals and the traditional Sarkic manipulation of flesh through thaumaturgy. With solemn reverence, Negrescu described the creature beneath the temple as the Mother, and characterized herself and her fellow villagers as the worker bees who delivered sustenance to her. When Dr. Lowe asked what exactly the Mother was, Negrescu responded in the most Sarkic fashion imaginable. The Mother was once a princess, the most beautiful daughter of the Blood Empress. The great Karcist, sorcerer king of Aditum, sought to conquer her as he did the domain of the Blood Empress. He claimed her as was his right, and she became his favored concubine. In time, she came to worship the great Karcist, just as we who hold to the old ways do. She begged to bear his children, and the great Karcist blessed her with his sacred seed. The Mother swelled with joy and life. Here she was planted, and here she grew. We, like the Pale Ones, must keep her fat and satisfied. The Pale spew the nectar into her many mouths, and her brood suckle upon her teats and grow strong. The Mother and the land are now one. Her earthen womb swells, and soon she will rupture. All around you is tinder for the gods. The words every Foundation researcher wants to hear, I'm sure. While once given the designation Euclid, before we knew the true extent of its abilities and its capacity for truly terrible harm, the Foundation has since reassigned the object class to Keter. And yet, despite that, you may be shocked to see just how lax the containment measures are for SCP-2191. The special containment procedures for 2191 involve monitoring the anomaly through a combination of Foundation agents disguised as forest rangers and remote-controlled camera drones for closer observation. But they otherwise refrain from interfering with the anomaly or with the way the locals choose to interact with it. If civilians or hostile entities breach the established security perimeter, lethal force is authorized and has sadly been required in several instances. Personally, I find the whole situation rather disturbing. Whenever the Foundation takes a lax view towards containment for a dangerous anomaly, it makes the deaths of innocents almost inevitable, which is something that I rarely, if ever, view to be an acceptable sacrifice. If I were put in charge of this operation, I would take an entirely different approach. One that doesn't play into the clawed fingers of the creatures that call SCP-2191 their nest. I would first institute It appears I have received a direct correspondence from a member of the O5 Council. This is highly unusual. And even more unusual, they've asked me to read it aloud to the DrBob audience, to ensure that their message here is clear and unambiguous. Okay, well, let's see. There are some who wish to believe that the Foundation has never nor will ever cater to the designs and desires of an anomalous entity. Foundation efforts to contain SCP-2191 are now thought to have inadvertently led to the deaths of approximately 40,000 over 45 years. The obvious choice would be to neutralize the threat, and we've tried, the number of civilian and Foundation casualties being well beyond acceptable numbers. In order to contain the larger threat, we must allow it to feed. We are aware of the offense caused by this procedure. This is not the first time, nor will it be the last, that the Foundation has been forced to commit a lesser evil in prevention of a greater. We do believe that, in the end, our current method is the most preferable with regards to both ethics and efficacy. We are fully aware that every sacrifice feeds SCP-2191-3, allowing it and its brood to thrive. But we are not about to sacrifice the entire Balkan Peninsula to neutralize that threat. Not yet. How comforting. Want more terrifying tales of the anomalous delivered straight to your feed, or better yet, your notifications? Subscribe to the DrBob channel and turn on notifications by hitting the bell, because sometimes hitting the bell is the scariest thing of all. Don't believe me? Check out my video on SCP-513, a cowbell, and never sleep again.